Hello, kia ora, g'day. I'm Philip Duncan from Weather Watch TV on YouTube with your Australia-only forecast right through till Sunday. Let's have a look and see what's happening at the moment. We've got another cold front sweeping along the south here. It's not very much of one, but you can see a few thunderstorms in the very eastern side of Western Australia. Some of that spilling over into the central part of Northern Territory and the southern parts of South Australia. So that front's heading towards Adelaide. Possibly by the time you're viewing this, it is now moving in over you with a few downpours as it moves eastwards. Also got a few showers along the eastern side, a couple of thunderstorms, mostly offshore, and that southeasterly wind carries on right up to the winterless north, where temperatures are actually down a little bit over the next couple of days as a result of that slightly colder airflow going all the way up to the tropics. Here is the wind energy map, so you can see what I'm talking about, that cooler airflow due to the high in the southern Tasman Sea between Tassie and New Zealand's South Island. Colder airflows all the way from New Zealand are coming up to Papua New Guinea. So that's why if you're up in the tropical part of Queensland, you might have noticed maybe that the temperature is not quite as high and humid as it's been in previous weeks. High pressure is still coming into Western Australia, but it's short-lived. There is another active cold front on the way. Active just means thunderstorms, chance of some energy as that cold front comes in. And you can also see here that cold front, the one that's happening today, moving into South Australia, heading towards Victoria overnight tonight, and Tasmania tomorrow. Northerly winds are blowing ahead of it. So the windiest weather is actually south of Australia in the bright shading. Elsewhere, apart from a coastal breeze in Queensland, the winds are pretty light around Australia today. So here is Tuesday's setup. So we've got the cold front, or the leftovers of it, moving into South Australia. That's high pressure though, also coming in hot on its heels, probably not the right term. Cold on its heels is the high pressure zone. So there are some showers around on Tuesday around South Australia and Victoria. For the most part, it's fewer than 5 millimetres, so it's not very much. You might get a few heavier falls as you're coming into Victoria here and the very southeast of South Australia. That's the main cold front moving along. So a bit of colder air south of that, maybe a couple of thunderstorms on Tuesday as this brushes the coastline and moves on in. Elsewhere, easterlies now coming in for Queensland, so a bit of a tilt from the southeasterly flow today, starting to go upwards a wee bit more. It's a little milder, but look, the red line right at the top of the screen, nowhere in Australia is under the red line. I don't know if I've noticed that this year. It possibly has happened, but I haven't noticed it. So that means that it is not as hot and humid, although it still is, but it's not as hot and humid around the tropical north of Australia this week. And those of you in Western Australia may also notice it's not quite as humid for those of you up around the Kimberley and the Pilbara. On Wednesday, the red line stays well north of Australia, but look, we've got a bit of thunderstorm activity in the Coral Sea and the Solomon Sea, and some of that is coming in around Queensland and producing some showers, maybe a few heavy downpours and thunderstorms in there. It's nothing major, but it does show you a little bit of a change that's happening at the moment out in the tropical area. And we'll talk about this as we go along over the next few weeks. But there is more chatter now about La Nina. Now, last year this happened as well, and it never happened. So the Bureau of Meteorology last year in Australia were very accurate with the La Nina predictions and their outlook. They take a look at all the global modelling, and they're quite honest about what other countries are saying versus how they're perceiving that. So seeing rainmakers out to the northeast of Australia, that's a bit of a sign of La Nina. It's not here yet, so don't get too worried, but we're monitoring it because it does produce more wet weather in the tropics, and being the dry season and seeing some downpours, that's why that's just a little bit interesting. High pressure in the south is keeping things pretty cold. In the southeast corner here, you can see the blue line coming through. So wintry weather, a bit of snow back into the mountains again, high pressure coming through. Look at Western Australia though. Once you see those windy nor'westers, that's a sign of a cold front coming through at this time of the year anyway. So once we get to Thursday, that is the next cold front, active cold front. So that means thunderstorms, squally showers where the wind suddenly picks up off the sea, and it covers a fairly large area. But again, this is right at the lower end of severe weather. You do have a severe weather risk based on that incoming cold front, but bottom of the scale as far as risk. Windy warm nor'westers come into the eastern side of southern Western Australia, moving in to South Australia itself. And as we go through Thursday and into Friday, those nor'westers come through into Victoria and Tasmania. But the east coast still has got showers, maybe a bit more of a southeasterly flow again, so not overly warm in Sydney and Port Macquarie and Newcastle and other eastern coastal areas, going right up to about Brisbane. On Friday, we do start to see a bit of a clearance Clarence, in the southeast, basically around New South Wales. As that west to northwest wind ahead of the cold front moves into New South Wales and the ACT, in the eastern half of Victoria, you will feel that nor'wester, and that pushes the cloud out to sea, out this way, and so you get the sun coming back, temperatures going up. But obviously there is a cold front moving along the southern states as we go to the end of the week. Again, right at the bottom of the risk scale, but some risk of thunderstorms, squally showers, maybe some hail in there, as this cold, wintry airflow comes into main centres, Port Lincoln, Adelaide, Kangaroo Island, Mount Gambier, and coming into Melbourne and surrounds, and then right down into Tasmania. All of Tasmania will get that by the very end of Friday, so the west coast has the highest risk of thunderstorms and the squally showers off the sea. Elsewhere, there isn't a lot to talk about. The skies are drying out a lot more, but a few showers still stuck around the northern rivers and the southeast of Queensland. So let's go into the weekend. Big picture, the polar airline and the airflow in the blue line, there we go, comes all the way up to the northern part of New South Wales. The severe weather box, once more, very lowest end of the scale, just suggests windy west to southwest winds, might be gale force, and of course some thunderstorms, some squally showers, and snow falling back in the mountains, which could be heavy for a time. When that blue line goes north and you've got moisture behind it, snow very likely down to 1,000 meters or maybe even lower than that. So we'll be monitoring that one as we go later into the week. Further to the north, dry skies returning to Queensland and easterly winds around the Northern Territory and the northern half of Western Australia. And Sunday doesn't see a great deal of change. High pressure is sort of dominating the left-hand half of Australia. So all of the Northern Territory is sort of on the edge of that, but you've got easterly winds, not a lot going on, not much happening in Western Australia, milder as a result of those northeasterly winds. And then you jump to the other side of Australia and the polar line coming right into Queensland or brushing Queensland's border, which means everybody northwards will feel that temperature down, except for the very tip of the far north of Queensland where that tropical red line starts to drop down just a little bit more there. So a bit of weather on the way over the next week in Australia, not necessarily severe, but still getting that touch of winter, brushing the southern states. Spring is only just around the corner, so we are likely to start to see some changes in the weather pattern. And the discussion about La Nina, I mean, it's often around, so I don't pay too much attention to it until it starts to really show up in the modelling or in the actual weather. And that is starting to show up. At the moment, we're seeing these subtropical systems here, another one here on Sunday next to Tonga. So those sorts of lows are what we're just monitoring. But like I say, the Bureau of Meteorology is sort of skeptical that this is going to happen anytime soon. They're indicating it may be more towards December or January if it happens. So we'll keep you up to date on the development of a potential La Nina, but for now we're in neutral, and that means anything can be thrown at us, which is why it's not overly surprising some parts of Queensland in the dry season may be getting a few showers or a little bit of wet weather. That's all from me for today. Thanks for all the comments on YouTube. I'll see you again tomorrow, Tuesday.